when we got into this town, there was a borough hall with a lot of steps to go up. And hanging, of course, from the borough hall was a big swastika. And there was German youth soldiers, I don't know what they call them again.
And that was kind of like, it had become kind of like a processing center for prisoners, correct?
Not necessarily, no. Because you gotta remember is that everybody's shot down in different parts and they bail out in different parts. And land could land 5 miles away from you. Land in trees, and so forth. So it was just that was a borough town hall, you know what I mean? Just like here, Cresskill, one, Dumont, another one. Well, it just happened to be I landed, he took me to that one.
Okay.
It was probably the closest one.
Okay.
And got out of the sidecar and he took me up the steps into the town hall, borough hall, town hall, I'm not sure. When I got inside, there was about 4 or 5 men. They were not soldiers, they were civilians. And they looked at my dog tags. Now, you know, you have it on there about my dog tags. And on my dog tags, I had H for Hebrew. And they know what that is. So they started to question me. Some could speak part English. And I didn't answer them. So they hit me, bruised me by, hit me on the arm, hit me across the head, pushing me on the floor, kicking me. And kept yelling, Judy, Judy, Judy. In German, it's Jewish. And then what happened was they took me over to a door. It was about 6 or 7 flights of stairs. And they pushed me down the steps. In there, I was in there for 4 or 5 days, I don't remember. They gave me a little water and a little bread to eat. And that's about it. There was a little light there. Then they brought me up, so forth, put me on a truck. No, they put me on another Jeep. And from there, they took me to what they call a clearing center for POWs, no matter if you're American, English, Air Force, ground crew, whatever. Big place, tremendous place.
And this whole time, you're not handcuffed, or
No. Well, there's no way you could do anything. You know, you can't fight them. You're in their mercy. In other words, you have no rights.
Right.
You know
So
what I mean?
you're injured, you're surrounded, so there's no point in handcuffing you, are you saying, because you can't get away?
No. Well, in the clearing center, they took us out. We only stayed there a short while, and we wasn't interrogated. Then we were sent to an old German prison. They used to hold regular prisoners before that. They had cells, regular cells with bars on it. They put me in a room by myself, and that's when I finally met up with my crew. And all the crew was there together.
What was your feeling at the time when you finally saw them? Did you think they were dead, or you had no idea?
Well, you have no idea, you know, nobody wants. Once you leave that airplane, there's nobody knows, you know, unless you actually come down together or close by, you see, oh, you know, that's one of your crew. And other planes are being shot down too, so you don't know. It can't, you know, a distance away, so forth. You don't know.
What was your feeling when you saw them?
You know, we were delighted we were alive, just being alive and so forth. And my pilot, he was glad. My pilot was glad that he was shot down. The reason why is he never liked to fly the B-24. He had a hard time with the plane, and he come from Memphis, Tennessee, He had dark, kinky hair. He was half Italian and half Irish. His hair turned completely white, and he was glad that he was, at least he didn't have to fly that airplane again. But that was only him, though, because he...
You're saying in his time in the military, his hair turned white during the...
From the mission.
Wow, okay. From the stress?
He was a little gray, but after that...
From the stress?
From the stress of flying the plane.
Wow, it's amazing.
One in the town hall, one out interrogations. Then they took me to another place where I was interrogated. Well, that was where the cells were. You know, I told it we were in. And each one of us were taken up to be interrogated one at a time. And they took me in this room, and they had a small table about as big as a card table, and on the other side sat this German officer, which could speak very good English. And he handed me some papers to sign. So I signed name, rank, and serial number. That's all you're told to do. I gave him the papers back, and he got very mad at me. And he says, I want you to fill the whole thing out. And I said, I shook my head. All I did was shook my head. He really got mad. He said, well, he says, I could have you sent to Siberia and you'll never get back home. Well, when I wouldn't sign, he called somebody in, a soldier, with a book about the Geneva Convention. And it had a lot of things in there that didn't belong in there. So I just gave him the book back, and he walked out. And he was getting mad, I could see. And I'm saying to myself, here's a 23-year-old boy, you know, captured in a foreign country, being Hebrew. What the hell is going to happen to me? I better shut my mouth. But I wouldn't cooperate, though. So what happened was, he started to tell me all about my bomb group. He started telling me where our mission was, how many men we had on board plane. He knew more than I did. So I told him. I says, well, he says, tell you the truth, I won't tell you, but one of your men signed everything. So that's when they took me out of there. That was that briefing there. Then they took me to a clearinghouse, the big camp. I think it was called, I don't know, had a name, but I just can't remember the name. And they had English there, they had all French there, all prisoners of war. And they fed us pretty good there. So what happened is, they made the decision, I guess, to send me to Stalag Luft IV. Now, this was over close to where we bombed. It wasn't that far away. So we went by railroad train. We got on trains and went through towns, marshalling yards. There was an air raid. We were parked in Hanover, and they took us off the trains, and all the civilians got off the trains, out of the train stations, and went down into shelters, air raid shelters. And they took us down, and halfway down there was a big iron door, which they closed, and we stayed on the other side of that. The reason why was because they knew that if they took us down amongst the civilians, we probably wouldn't have came out alive. So at least they had some humanity in their bones, or whatever you want to call it.
Now, why would you not have come out alive if you went down into the shelter?
They would have killed us.
Oh,
They would have killed us.
but if they wanted
Sure.
to kill you, why not just kill you?
Huh?
Regardless,
Well,
why-
that's civilians now. I'm not
Oh,
talking
you
about
mean the
soldiers.
civilians would have killed you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay.
Yeah. So they didn't want that on their hands, you know. Later on, they could probably be trials. Who the hell knows what, you know?
Right.
But anyway, we brought up, put back on the train again, and with the civilians, and we went all the way over to Stalag Luft IV.
What were the conditions on the train? Were you sitting, standing? What?
Times, if there was a few seats, they would let us sit down. I sat down because my leg. The rest of the fellas were not wounded. So we got to the German prison camp, Stalag Luft IV, and it was in Gross Tychow. That's where the prison camp was.
Now, what are you thinking as you're arriving there? Are you aware at this time what's going on in the concentration camps? Or there's just rumors that there are things going on?
The Germans kept a lot of things secret, believe me. You know, I guess they were afraid of their own lives because Germans killed Germans, you know, because they had certain rules, their rules, I guess. And so they kept saying, we found out later on that they were sending the Jews and also priests and political prisoners to these test chambers.
So as you are arriving in this camp, you know you've been singled out because you're Jewish, but you don't know the extent of it yet. You don't know the extreme that they've been going through, that they were going through at that time in other parts of the world.
See, the only thing is that the only time there was any, let's say, questions about me being Jewish is when I was interrogated and so forth. In other words, that's when, but otherwise, amongst the men and amongst the soldiers, they didn't single me out and say, here, you got to sit at the back of the bus. You know what I'm talking about?
Right, or for beatings or...
Yeah.
Okay.
We get to this siding. They had a siding on the road where the train stopped. They got us all out. And the prison camp was actually in a forest, like. And it was like I think a 4-mile walk up this dirt road to the prison camp. So we had to walk. And when they had guards in front of us, back of us, they had German Shepherd dogs, so forth. So you couldn't, you know, try to escape.
How many of you were there? How many prisoners?
I'm not sure how many were marching. It was not only us, because our officers did not go to our prison camps. Our officers went to officers' prison camps. The Germans, they separated the officers from the enlisted men, as they call us. It could have been 50 or 60 at that time, you know. It's hard to say. And at that time, my foot swelling went down quite a bit. And we get to this prison camp out in the Vorlager, they called it. That's outside the compounds. Stalag Luft IV had 4 compounds, A, B, C, and D, and they were building another one because they were getting prisoners every day more and more and more. They had no room for them. They were sending them there. Don't forget, in Germany, they had a lot of prison camps for all different, had some prison camps, maybe you had 200 men in it, and so forth. But this was a big prison camp. This was the biggest Air Force prison camp. was all Air Force there.
Okay, so you get to the camp, and what happens? Do they interrogate you? Do they, and what were you thinking that was gonna happen to you at that time?
Well, you don't know. You know, you're going to serve time, like in prison.
What are you
You know,
thinking?
you
I'm
never
gonna-
know.
I'm gonna get worked over all the time, I'm gonna be killed?
Well, you don't know that, see.
But were you thinking that at the time?
Try to mark it out of my mind. In other words, that's when I got there, and we had to climb stairs to the second floor where they had a clearinghouse for them, I guess. I don't know what they call it. And when I got up the top of the steps, there was a door to the right of me. And somebody opened the door and pushed me inside and closed the door. Then I felt that I got a little apprehensive of what's going to happen. So I opened the door a little bit, and I saw my radio operator, Bill Booth, go by. And I said, Bill, if something happens to me, you tell my wife, because he knew my wife for going to conventions and so forth. And then it closed the door. Well, I was in there for about half an hour. Finally, they take me out and bring me over to this one table way down at the one end. And at each table they had in there, they had a German soldier on the other side of it. And you had to strip down, take all your clothes off, take it off, and you could put it back on again. They would see if you had any hidden food which came from Red Cross parcels. It would be the only way you could get, you know, food. And there was canned goods in there, and they would punch you with an ice pick, so you'd have to eat it right away, so you wouldn't try to escape and use it for food. Well, as I bent over, take my shoes off, there was a bench behind me. And what do you call it, said, how do I put it now? Oh, and all of a sudden, I mean, I turned around to take my shoes off. I thought he wanted to take my shoes off. He hit me over the back of the neck with a towel, and it stunned me. I hit the floor, and finally I got up. In the meantime, there was like 4 German soldiers, 4 or 5 of them, over to one side. They came over and got me, and they started to question me, so forth. Started to hit me. That's when they started to hit me. Was there too. And what are you doing? We don't allow no Jews in our army. So one of my members of my crew was not too far away, and he yelled over, we let him in ours. And they walked over to him, and the German soldier took out his gun and put it to his head, and they said, the next time you open your mouth, that you know what was going to happen. They would have killed him.
And they meant it. They would have shot him on the spot.
Believe me, they meant it. They meant it. Give them a reason to do something. They meant it. And finally,
And so what did you say? You said something.
I said, yelled over, I said, please stay out of it. This is my problem, not yours. Stay out of it. I didn't want to have something happen to him. So then finally, I got completely to, we had a fellow called Big Stoop, and he was there with the other guys, and he was like 6'5" tall. He weighed about 250 pounds, and he had hands about the size of bananas, and he loved to hit guys in the back of the neck and on the shoulders with his hands. And I think there was something wrong with him, but that Big Stoop became a real name in our prison camp. Then from there, they took us into the compound, and I was taken to Compound C, so was the rest of my crew. But we were not assigned to the same room. They were in other rooms inside the barracks. The barracks held about 200 men, and they had about 24, 25 men to a room. There was no bunk beds. It was just straw on the floor, so we laid on a straw for a while. There was a shortage of lumber, and so forth. And what happened was, in mining, the lumber, to build. And they were building another compound, too, for more men. So in there, I got to meet 20-something other fellas, all from different parts of the country, north, east, south, west, and so forth. And we were in there, and you wasn't allowed. In the barracks, they had 2 latrines. Then they had what they call a washroom. Well, the washroom was a bucket of water, if you want to take a wash. Most of the time we spent there, I would say we did a lot of walking. But when you walked, you only walked 2 together. Of course, they didn't want you to crowd up. Because if you crowded up, the Germans would probably shoot at you. So they had around the compound, they had barbed wire fences. They had rolled barbed wire, too, besides on the other side of that. And they had a roadway in between. And that Germans in the towers, on each corner of the compound, they had these towers. And they had machine guns in there, Another thing, too, is that when it came to eating, most of the time, we had a bucket of spuds. Each room had its own bucket with its room number on it. And every day a different fellow was designated to go over to where the Germans had a place where they could cook. They had these big copper vats where they would cook stuff in there. Our men were the cooks. They volunteered before I got there, and so forth. And that's what you would have. And each room had a room chief that you elected yourself to take care of divvying out any kind of food that came into the room. And they wanted me to be, and I wouldn't take it because, here you are standing around a table, and the guy has a bucket of spuds, and he's got a cup, and he has to go ahead and give each one. God forbid if he gave you more than the other guy. So anyway,
that would be cause for a fight if proper
yeah,
distribution.
more. I think there was fights in the hallways sometimes, but never anything where it was more or less horsing around, as they say. We all knew we wanted to get out and go home.
But there are, even if you're a prisoner of war, there's prison etiquette and prison rules.
That's right.
What would be
There's
one or 2 rules you can't break? That would be
No, there was no rules, nothing made up.
Mhm.
You're on your own. In other words,
I mean, among the men, is there a certain code or etiquette?
no.
No?
No, it would be to make sure you don't step out of line. In other words, because we would take care of our own, one way or another. But there was nothing written down, see, that way. But so we had body lice from the straw, I guess, and body lice is terrible. Bite you. It would go on your underwear, bite your shoulders, your arms, your back, and so forth. And that was one of the worst things. And finally we got bunk beds. We were assigned to bunk beds. I was assigned to one by the room chief. He was in charge. It's just like a sergeant in charge in the American Army. And I was with a fellow from Chicago, Charles Essex. And we became very friendly, so forth. And when we marched across Germany, I started out with him marching across Germany. Now, we also went out and peeled the potatoes. They had coal cellars like, and they would take us out in a group, and they would give us knives, and we would peel it. But we never peeled the potatoes. We scraped the potatoes, so we didn't lose a lot of the potato. They had carrots there. I never seen such big carrots. And we did the same thing with them. So we would get that into a bucket. In the morning, we had coffee. We had coffee. I don't know what it was made out of, but and then we had bread. Pieces of we got loaves of bread that were so hard, they said they were made out of sawdust and other chemicals and so forth. Not any dough. I don't know how they made it. Very hard. That was very hard to slice to give somebody, and to get used to eating it was even worse yet.
You had to eat it, right? Because you had
Well, that's it. And also, some fellas smoked a lot. Now, in the Red Cross parcel, we got 5 packs of cigarettes. And we'll go ahead, but we didn't get the whole parcel of it. The parcel was divvied up, was outside in the forelocker. In other words, if you were supposed to get a parcel a week, if it came in from Lubeck, that's where it came from, through the Red Cross on trucks into the compound, it would not go to us, it would go to the forelocker where they had a big stash of whatever you call it. There was a small hospital on the base. The real wounded guys were in that hospital. And we had American doctor, Mr. Kaplan. And Dr. Kaplan was Hebrew himself. But Dr. Kaplan could get along with him. He could talk German. And he was shot down from a mission. He flew out of Italy. And he took care of, and there was an English doctor and some German doctors. Now, I don't know what happened out there because nobody ever gave us any news. We got German newspapers, and it was all propaganda. Some guys could read German, and it was like they were winning the war all along, you know, and the whole thing. But we also went out and played some baseball, got some gloves through the Red Cross and the baseball and so forth. But the biggest thing was guys played cards, is that we actually had to police our area too, you know what I mean by that, and so forth. But then they had fellas who were elected before I got there. They were like the American, how would you put it, representing the American soldier. And we had one fellow by the name of Troy, very nice guy. And he come into the barracks one day and he says, how many Catholic fellas in this room put their hands up? How many Protestant fellas? They put their hands up. And he says, Jewish fellas, you put your hands up with the Protestant fellas. They were going to build a church. The Germans thought that the war was going to go on forever, I guess. I don't know. But that was one of the jokes.
So they actually, did you actually go build that, or that was really just...
No, they were going to build it.
Oh, okay.
They had, I don't know where they were going to put it. But then also, we had a little meeting room. And in there, fellas used to go in there and talk and the stuff. And the Red Cross sent down instruments. So they had some fellas could play instruments, and they made their own little band up, but the stuff had to stay in that room where they used to play. You know, we go down and listen to them a little bit. Well, they picked up this one song. It was, this is the Master Race and the Fuhrer Face. And it was actually made popular in this country by a fella that had a harmonica group. And I forget his name now. But anyway, well, I went down there one day and they started to play that song. Well, picture this, 3 or 4 German guards up in the front. And these fellas, when it came to the time, go, this is the Master Race. We all went like that. And the Germans would clap, play it again, 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 again. So they played it over and over again. And they didn't know what the hell we were clapping for. They were clapping with us.
They had no idea. Okay.
No.
So
So
God
that-
forbid they would find out.
But otherwise, the time was spent, a lot of guys would sleep. The barracks was closed up it was winter time, so it was early. They used to put boards over the windows so there was no light showing through. The barracks were built up on stilts, and they had German Shepherd dogs would roam around underneath there. We could hear them at night, and those, in case anybody tried to go through the boards and escape, they never would have made it because of that. We had one fella, Jewish fella too, and he was in my room. His father had a lot of money. He came from, I don't know, South Jersey or something like that. Well, he would never take care of himself. In other words, you could go in the washroom, get some water, and clean yourself down with soap and stuff. You wasn't taking a bath, but you could keep yourself clean. You couldn't shave because you had nothing to shave with. But he wouldn't do none of that. And so they went after him. When it was snow on the ground, outside, a couple of fellas ran over to him and tackled him, held him on the ground, pushed snow in his face and everything else, till finally they lit him up. Finally, he called me one day and he says, "Hey, Herb, you're Jewish." He says, "How come they don't do that to you?" I said, "'Cause I take care of myself." I said, "God damn it, get a little clean. Nobody even wants to be near you. You smell so." In other words, you could actually take care of yourself. You know, now who wants to be dirty with all that lice and shit besides? You know, there's nothing they gave you for lice. They did no spraying, none of that stuff. The lice were with us from the day we got in to the day we were liberated.
So that make it like even very difficult to even sleep with that, or
Oh yeah, yeah,
is it
but
possible to even get used to it?
you had to get used to it. It was not, you had nothing at all to give you. You know what I
You
mean?
got that stuff going in your ears, in your nose.
No. This kind of lice was I don't know what kind it was. Never found out. It hugged to your underwear and stuff, your undergarments. Mostly on top of your body, your shirt. It was like on the seams. You got a seam here, and so forth. That's where they were.
Okay. All right. So let's and just on this issue of people, your fellow prisoners were expected to make an effort and care for themselves. That's why that person got picked on. You said, right? Because
Yeah.
you had to do your
Well,
part.
it's just like here, if you bought a bar of candy and you're with your buddy, so forth, when don't you go ahead and say, "You want a piece?"
Right.
There, if you got something, you didn't offer anybody anything. You're supposed to know that this might have to last you. You don't know when your next meal could be or not be. You don't know where you're going to be. they could do anything with you. They could take you out in the middle of the night and shoot you. Nobody there to witness it, so forth. So in other words, you have to take care of yourself. And my radio operator, he would eat everything because he was a big guy, and then he wouldn't have nothing else to eat. So we had to tolerate it in between. Now, cigarettes became a bartering thing. I took my cigarettes. I didn't smoke. What I did get, and I would give them to the guys in my room that wanted cigarettes. Well, you could get things with those cigarettes through the Germans. Of course, the Germans didn't have regular cigarettes. They had to roll their own. They used to have a little pouch with tobacco in it, so a little tin. They had papers, and they took out the papers, and they put the tobacco in there, roll it up, and and that's what they would smoke. So they loved our cigarettes. So in other words, a cigarette could get you a lot of things. It might kill a lot of people now, but those cigarettes helped a lot of guys that were in the prison camps and so forth.
Okay. And the last thing before we get to the march is communication with home. Tell me about letters, sending and receiving letters. Did you send letters and receive letters from home?
I sent letters, but I never received them. And some fellas even received parcels of food from home, and they would get them. My wife sent me parcels, and my mother did, but I never got them, because I was on the road then, marching across Germany, I guess.